hollow Earth theory holds that the Earth is a hollow planet with ancient entrances to the underworld scattered throughout it, with the North and South poles being two of the main entrances. This theory has been reported since ancient times, and the scientists such as Edmond Halley have defended it throughout history. Let us try to trace the history of this hypothesis. Plato is considered to be the first theoretician of the hollow Earth, and that this idea was raised by the famous scientist and member of the St. Petersburg Academy of Sciences, the mathematician Leonhard Euler. According to one of Euler's theories, our planet is hollow, and inside it there is another sun that shines above the habitable continents. He recognized the existence of a hollow shell separated at a great distance from the nucleus. This shell, according to him, has exits at the north and south poles, as the scientists believed such a device on Earth would provide better stability to the planet than several shells. Now, the idea of a hollow Earth was also advocated in 1692 by the famous astronomer Edmond Halley, the same one who discovered the Halley's Comet. He believed that the Earth consisted of shelves about 800 kilometers thick, two concentric outer shells separated by atmospheres and having their own magnetic poles, and a central core with diameters similar to those of Venus, Mars, and Mercury. Also, the spheres rotated at a different speed. Halley believed that the leakage of the inner atmosphere was the cause of the northern lights. In 1818, the American engineer John Cleves Symmes appealed to the American Congress to finance an expedition to search for a passage into the interior of the Earth. On April 15, 1818, members of the Congress, the president of the university, and several great scholars received a message. I declare that Earth is hollow and habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other, and that it is open in the poles of 12 or 16 degrees. I ask 100 brave companions well equipped to start from Siberia in the full season with reindeer and sleighs on the ice of the frozen sea. I engage we find a warm and rich land stocked with thrifty vegetables and animals, if not men. I pledge my life in support of this truth, and I am ready to explore the hollow if the world will support and aid me in the undertaking. Of course, they didn't give him money or even buy into his theory, although he gained a large group of followers after that. In the 20th century, with new knowledge of geography and geology, more people who continued to try to research the mysterious world were appearing. For example, some of the Nazi leaders, lovers of ancient myths and the occult in Germany, showed considerable interest in such theories. By the turn of the 20th century, other scientists such as William Reed and Marshall Gardner also believed they could prove the existence of inner world. One of the most curious facts used by Arctic explorers is that air and water temperatures become warmer as they approach the North Pole. Strange, isn't it? Based on these and other observations, they also argue that mammoths are not extinct, but still inhabit Earth's interior. In contrast, Central Asian Buddhists believed in a wonderful land beneath our feet known as Agartha. Agartha is supposed to be a place where beings are more beautiful and wiser than us, and who have a king who has the power to read the human soul. For thousands of years, Tibetan scholars, in addition to teaching about an inner and peaceful world, have said that they are in contact with the king of the inner world, or supreme ruler for the entire planet, whose representative to the outer world is Dalai Lama. They also talk and write about tunnels that connect Tibet to the inner world, saying that there are many more like these on Earth, such as those found under the Great Pyramids of Egypt and South America. And entrances to underground cities are said to exist around the vast Amazon basin and connect the lost city of El Dorado to the rest of the ancient world. The capital of this inner world, and therefore of the entire world, is a city called Shambhala. In Sanskrit, Shambhala means place of peace, tranquility, and happiness. According to the Buddhists, there are many portals through which the inner earth, Agartha, can be reached, but only if they're willing to admit you. Some people believe that there are exactly 7 doors leading to the surface, which can coincident with the 7 chakras of the earth, similar to the 7 chakras of man. It is believed that the Lemurians and Atlanteans built pyramids on these energy centers, and they are in the jungles of Amazonia in Mexico at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean under the Taklamakan Desert in Central Asia in China. Agartha is believed to be home to extinct civilizations such as the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, and it is also believed that the inhabitants of northern Mexico made dungeons to hide from the erupting volcanoes. In the 1920s, archaeologist Edmond Halley explored many caves in South America that supposedly had an entrance to the inner earth. It is said that somewhere there in one of the caves, a spaceship belonging to the Atlanteans was found. Now that's all fine, but if we follow the path of logic and check the satellite images, it should get really clear. Well, yes, but we have a problem. NASA photos and videos of both poles are very rare. They're hard to find, but even when there are some, they're all covered with either ice or some anomaly or clouds, or covered on purpose. On November 23, 1968, the American space probe ESSE-7 took several pictures of the North Pole in the complete absence of clouds. In these pictures, a huge black hole is clearly visible in the region of the pole. The photos are authentic. Expertise has been conducted more than once. Their publication rekindled interest in the theory that our planet is hollow and that other life could exist inside. Let's look at the facts. For example, the Son Doong Cave in central Vietnam, which has its own river, its own jungle, and can hold a 40-story skyscraper. It is 6.5 kilometers long, 200 meters high, and 150 meters wide. And Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, North America, which is the longest cave system on Earth. The total length is 591 kilometers and has not yet been explored to its end. So, who can confirm for us that these naturally formed caves of nature do not go much deeper? In India, the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita are the 2 most famous texts. The Ramayana tells the story of the great avatar Rama, and the Gita the story of Krishna. The Ramayana describes Rama as an emissary from Agartha who arrives on aero vehicle. These aerial vehicles were called Vimanas, meaning the car or chariot of the gods. Interestingly, flying objects have remained a part of all stories about underground civilizations. In Egypt, it was believed that a secret tunnel connected the Great Pyramid in Giza with an underground city where the pharaohs communicated with the gods of the underworld. In 1895, the Nobel Prize winner Fridtjof Nansen set out an expedition to the North Pole but completely lost his orientation when he came across a place that was not on any of the maps, and he had the best orienting devices of his time. Many strange things happen, one of which is the sudden change in temperature from very cold to startlingly hot. It's not clearly where Hansen was, but he certainly wasn't in Kansas. Central Asia is home to legends of an underground race called the Agardi. The Altai Mountains are home to the Chud tribe. In the book Shambhala, Rorik says that the name Chud in Russian has the same origin as the word miracle. His guide through the Altai Mountains told him that the Chud were originally strong but peaceful tribe that flourished in this area in the distant past. Nikolai Rorik also mentions that everywhere in the the Altai Mountains on the way to Khotan, the horses' hooves sounded hollow when they struck the ground, as if they were riding over vast underground caverns. Other members of the caravan addressed Röhrig with the following: "Do you hear what hollow underground passages we cross? Through these passages, people who are familiar with them can reach distant countries. A long time ago, people lived there, and now they went inside and found an underground passage to the underworld. Very rarely some of them resurface. In our market, such people come with strange, very ancient money, but no one can even remember the time when this money was used here." When Röhrig asked if he too could see such people, his companions told him, "Yes, if your thoughts are high enough to come into contact with these holy people, for only sinners are found on earth, and pure and brave people pass on to something more beautiful." The first information about the findings confirming the existence of mysterious people living underground appear in the magazine Amazing Stories in 1946. The article was written by the American writer, journalist, and scientist Richard Shaver. He writes about his contact with the inhabitants of the underground civilization. The author claims that he managed to live among underground mutants for several weeks. The scientist describes the appearance of the underground inhabitants as follows: "They look like demons from the ancient legends of Earthlings." One can attribute these stories to the wild imagination of a famous journalist, but after the publication of these records, the magazine received many responses from readers who confirmed his words. The Hollow Earth is described in the novel by academician Vladimir Obruchev, Plutonia. Jules Verne wrote about it in the novel Journey to the Center of the Earth, Nikolai Röhrig, and many other authors as well. This hypothesis was treated very seriously in Hitler's Germany, and they even undertook a search for passages to the interior of the Earth. In 1969, the popular book The Hollow Earth was published by Dr. Raymond Bernard, who at the time disappeared into the caves of South America, and he reached the underground world, as his followers believe. The legend of Agartha is also discussed in detail by another writer, the self-educated Christian hermetic Saint Yahweh the Aldver, who, thanks to his marriage which made him very wealthy, was able to indulge his longings and gain mystical understanding, while also providing him with a number of contacts with major names in French occultism and access to membership in number of Masonic and Rosicrucian orders. In 1885, he began taking Sanskrit lessons from Haji Sharif, about whom extremely little is known except that he left India in 1857. The manuscripts of the lessons which he took are preserved in the library of Sorbonne in Paris. In them, Sharif mentions the great school of Agartha and the holy land of Agartha. Although he did not have the opportunity to visit Agartha physically, the Aldver finds an ingenious alternative. By releasing his astral body or by astral projection, he is able to visit this realm in energy form. His astral adventures were published in series of books, which he published at his own expense. However, the most interesting thing is that he destroys the entire batch of his last work, Mission de Lindle, as he fears that he has revealed too many secrets about Agartha and may pay for this transgression with his life. Only 2 copies survive, one he kept for himself and one hidden from the printer. According to him, Agartha moved underground at the beginning of Kali Yuga around 3200 BC, and its inhabitants possessed technology impressive for the time in which he lived. The inhabitants of Agartha knew well about the surface dwellers and sometimes sent agents. Agartha had many libraries in which all the knowledge of the earth was recorded on stone tablets, including even the means by which the living could communicate with the souls of the dead. In 1908, Willis George Emerson's book with the strange title The Smoky God was published, which was presented as a true story about the mysterious adventure of the Norwegian sailor Olaf Jansen and his father. While sailing north, they fell into a hole around the North Pole and ended up in an unknown world where a highly developed civilization lived. Its inhabitants communicated telepathically and moved at great speed on disc-shaped aircrafts. There also was a sun located in the center of the earth. Their capital was the original Garden of Eden. Later works by other authors such as Agartha, Secrets of the Underground Cities, have identified the civilization Jansen encountered with Agartha, although Emerson did not use this name. After 2 years, the father and son left this world through a hole all the way to Antarctica at the South Pole. On the way out, the father perished in the ocean, but the son survived and somehow returned to Europe. Because the stories he told about this seemingly fantastic world, Olaf Jansen was imprisoned for 24 years in a mental hospital. He was considered abnormal. At the age of 90, he befriended Willis George Emerson. On his deathbed, he told him in detail about his adventure, supporting his account with real journals and maps of the road. Until his death, Olaf convinced those around him of the veracity of what happened to him and his father. In the book, he said that humans there live from 400 to 800 years and that are highly advanced in science. They can relay their thoughts to each other through a certain type of radiation and have energy sources far more powerful than our electricity. They are the creators of flying saucers, which are powered by this powerful energy derived from the electromagnetism of the atmosphere, and they are about 4 meters tall. He says that it rained there once a day, and the title of the book comes from the name Smoky Sun that used to be there. Also, his descriptions of silent flying objects are amazing. He says that they encounter the atmospheric pressure, or as he calls gravity, and so they stayed in air. The more fantastic the theory sounds, the more alive it becomes, and in the 20th century it surfaced again in the works of the famous mystical conspirator Miguel Serrano. He was a politician, ambassador of Chile in India, Bulgaria, Austria, communicated with Rurich, Indira Gandhi, Dalai Lama, and many other famous world celebrities. After World War II, he worked for a long time in the UN Atomic Energy Commission. But in addition to all of this, he raised the incredibly insane theory of the development of humanity and the emergence of a race of superhumans, which Serrano published before the beginning of World War II. The theory was so popular with Hitler and the terrorists of the Third Reich that they included it as a part of their plans. Serrano took the theory of the hollow earth literally and believed that inside the earth there is a space suitable for human life, which has its own sun, grass, trees, rivers. In the hollow earth live the representatives of the future race of the earth, and you can get there through a system of caves in the Himalayas, in Tibet, in Pamirs, the Andes, but there are also entrances at the poles, the Arctic and Antarctica. Serrano mentioned the existence of an oasis with warm waters near the coast of Antarctica, but he himself traveled to Antarctica with a Chilean military expedition. Another interesting fact is that the United States government does not allow airplanes to fly over the poles. All flights are directed to fly past the poles. Any pilot flying over these areas can tell you so. Another thing, icebergs that float past the poles are made of cool water, not salt water. Another interesting question is, why is it warmer at the poles 600 miles away than 1,000 miles away? In 1943, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz said a rather remarkable phrase: "The German submarine fleet is proud of the fact that on the other side of the world it has created an impregnable fortress for the Führer." It turns out that from 1938 to 1943, the Nazis built a secret base in Antarctica. There was a secret compound of the German submarines Führer's convoy, which included 35 submarines. At the very end of the war, in the port of Kiel, they were stripped of their torpedo armament and loaded with containers of various goods and boarded by mystery passengers whose faces were hidden by surgical masks. The crew of the submarines was chosen from among sailors who did not have families or living relatives, and together with them they took a vow of silence. The commander of one of the submarines was 25-year-old Wilhelm Bernard, and on the night of April 13, 1945, the submarine U-530 left Kiel. Reaching the shores of Antarctica, the crew members found a suitable ice cave there and carefully unloaded the containers with relics of the Third Reich, including documents and personal belongings of Hitler. And this is the first stage of the operation, code-named Valkyria II. On July 10, 1945, U-530 entered the Argentine port of Mar del Plata and surrendered to the victors. Euro-ufologist and virtual archaeologist Valentin Dektaryov made a new sensational discovery in Antarctica, his favorite place for research. With the help of satellite photos, he claims to have been able to find the legendary entrance of the underground world, where Hitler and his entourage probably once escaped after the fall of the Third Reich. This is written by Esoter. It is no coincidence that the Antarctica seriously excited the Nazi leaders and their subordinates, German scientists, esoterists, mystics. The thing is, that's not just a no-man's land, as some researchers of the activities of the secret missions of the Third Reich have believed, but also a possible entry point to the underworld, if it's assumed that such one exists. Considering what we know from the legends of all the peoples of the world, this is not difficult at all. Some scientists are even quite argumentatively proving now that the Earth is hollow, and it is quite possible that such a world like ours and such a civilization, which unlike ours does not wage a constant struggle with the natural and cosmic elements, was formed in it, one that's more calmer, ancient, wise and powerful. The entrance to this underground world was sought by many, not least Hitler, but it is believed that the leader of the Third Reich miraculously managed to find it in Antarctica. A few years ago, sensational news spread across the internet from the American virtual archaeologist Joseph Skipper, who claimed to have found the Antarctic entrance to the underground kingdom on satellite images. Unfortunately, this finding has not yet been confirmed or refuted. But here is a new find, a new entry into the underground world, now from the Russian explorer from the Urals. It can't be a volcano crater, Valentin says. Note, the surface of the inner part of the mountain formation I discovered is very steep, but there is no solidified lava. Here are the coordinates of the entrance. See for yourself and draw your own conclusions. If you have even the slightest chance, go there to explore. It gets very interesting when the researchers throw in the reptilian race as well. In India, they are known as Nagas, snake-like people or lizard people who inhabit the underground cities of Patala and Bhavagati. These centers are believed to be located beneath the Himalayas, and from there the Nagas wage wars with their own kind, with humans and with other subterranean inhabitants of Great Agartha Empire. Even today, millions of Hindus believe that the entrance to Patala is the well of Shesha in Benares. In his book The Venomous Reptiles, researcher Scherner A. Minton noted that it was a real entrance with 40 steps that led to a concentric depression and ended against a closed stone door surmounted by a cobra bas relief. Professor Ernst Moldashev had a similar experience in the attempt to enter such well-guarded premises in the Samadhi caves. Tibet is also associated with a mystical tomb, also called Patala, to which a system of tunnels leads, ending in a vast underground cavity. It is believed that these underground highways probably run through the entire Asian continent and even beyond. The Naga civilization is highly developed and possesses advanced technologies. Among their inventions are so-called the striking arrays and the Vimana, or disc-shaped airships. These machines are described in detail in the ancient Vedic texts, including the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. In South America, they are amazing caves connected by endless complex transitions, the so-called Chincanasi. Indian Hopi legends say that snake people live in their depths. These caves are practically unexplored. By order of the authorities, all doors entering them are tightly closed with bars. In Chincanas, dozens of adventurers were unhappy. Some tried to penetrate the dark depths of curiosity, others because of the thirst for profit. The treasures of the Incas are hidden in the legends of Chincas, and those lucky people who were able to get out of the creepy caves were forever damaged in the mind. From the inconsistent stories they were telling, we can only imagine what creatures they met in the depths of earth. These inhabitants of the lower world were both human and snake-like. In the summer of 2003, a scandalous discovery was made in the Bucegi Mountains area in Romania. The top-secret occult department of the intelligence services, the Department Zero, revealed the secret of this place that could have changed completely the fate of human civilization. Hidden in these mountains near the outskirts of Transylvania is located the hidden Sphinx that holds new secrets. By using the most advanced technology, Pentagon detected a mysterious sealed camera in the mountain itself not far from the Romanian Sphinx, which was protected by an energy barrier. A complete stranger under the name Rado Chinamar witnessed things that could have changed the whole concept of humanity, thanks to having earned the trust of enlightened individuals and becoming a part of a greater mystery. A small part of which he witnessed with his own eyes is linked directly to what happened at the Romanian Sphinx, and this is what he shared with us. Today, we're going to dive into the history of Rado Chinamar, who will share with us exclusive details about the secret documents, files, research and expeditions conducted by the intelligence services, which are most frequently linked to ancient alien technology. What did they discover? What use does this have for all of us today? And what is the link with the Egyptian pyramids? We're going to find out in this first part of the story about the Romanian Sphinx and the secret of Rado Chinamar. Chinamar said that Romania hadn't committed exclusively to keeping the discovery secret, but yet we don't know what terms were negotiated, nor any other details of what really happened there. Chinamar's opinion on the matter is as follows. For the moment, the methods being used to completely repulse any attempts to learn anything about this discovery are misinformation and lack of anything material evidence. The task is not easy, but as far as I know, it has been carried out successfully so far. In my opinion though, this state of affairs cannot go on much longer. I'm going to analyze these aspects after I present all the details which have gradually led to this extraordinary discovery on the territory of Romania. The Pentagon carried out several secret military programs simultaneously, one of which was connected with these geodesic espionage. They invested incredible amounts of money in technology that surpassed current scientific knowledge. The source of these fabulous technologies is kept in secret, of course, and we can only guess what is the reason for that. The Pentagon owns a lot of geostationary satellites that have precise surveillance targets. In 2002, one of these satellites, based on wave technology, detected a certain structure in the depths of mountainous areas in Romania, more precisely in a specific area of the Bucegi Mountains. At first, it was thought that it was a strange karst formation that had been identified repeatedly in many places on the planet, but this turns out to be much different than we thought. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel for more interesting episodes like this one. Later, the specialists from the Department of Classified Data Analysis of the Pentagon informed their superiors that there were three aspects that raise big questions about the data recorded in the Bucegi area. First, the cavity found in the mountain had no link to the outside world because it was inside the mountain at a certain distance from its slope. Second, the formation had the shape of a tunnel, which the registered data described as very symmetrical, turning suddenly at the angle of 26 degrees toward the core of the mountain. Besides, the trajectory of the tunnel was flat. For comparison, if we consider the base of the mountain as defining, the tunnel begins at about 1/3 of it and then continues in a perfect straight line. The third element, however, shocked Pentagon officials the most. The satellite's scan revealed two huge barriers in the solid stone interior of the structure, which blocked the beginning and the end of the tunnel. A secret source then gave Radu the honor to see a photo of the computer plan of the strange structure in the mountain core that included numerous figures and data. The blocked areas were marked in red, which explained that they simply repelled any kind of drilling or analysis, as if they were keeping something in secret. It's very possible that it's all about something extraordinary. That's the conclusion made by few who knew about this mysterious case. This, of course, leads to a much more delicate question. Who created all of this? The first energy barrier at the beginning of the tunnel was erected as a wall blocking the entrance to the tunnel. The second energy barrier was like a dome or hemisphere and was located at the other end of the tunnel, blocking the exit. Even closer to the center of the mountain and what lies within. Dr. Ernst Moldashev has some interesting expeditions that have a same link in the Samadhi caves. If you're interested, we can make episodes about him as well. The Pentagon is failing to understand why the tunnel zigzagged towards the central area of the mountain, nor have they figured out the significance of the 26-degree angle that appeared in its design. The structure was situated parallel to the ground, and the dome energy barrier was located vertically and was erected beneath the rock formation called the Babele. The vertical came up at approximately 40 meters height between Babele and the Sphinx of Bucegi. One of the secret sources of Chinamar told him about the fastest way to reach the inside of the mountain. It's also a great mystery who were those who had created all of these structures, how they created them without outside access to the depths of the mountains, but directly from within. One can assume that this was done for maximum security reasons in order to preserve the integrity of this site. The only explanation for the used technology would be that somehow they had buried the main entrance of the tunnel after they activated the energy safety barrier. However, this requires a huge amount of stone, not to mention the technology which is required for a job like this. Radu also got a special map before entering that specific region. The map corresponded to what the Pentagon had calculated. It had the easiest way to get below the surface centrally from the entrance, with the starting point that was located in its slope approximately 60-70 meters from the first energy barrier located inside. This is what Chinamar said about this. As far as I was concerned, I was relatively skeptical of the decision because I was aware that those who had created the structure in question could have guessed that it was possible to enter that way and could have taken some precautions. Still, my source assured that there was a high-tech support which the United States military would provide in the form of an extremely professional facility to quickly drill into the rock. This technology used a very powerful plasma jet and a rotating magnetic field that could guarantee that they would reach the walls of the tunnel in less than 2 days, including the preparations needed. In case of failure, we agreed to use the shorter method of direct penetration to the energy barrier of the tunnel. The entire operation was taking place in secret, and that was the whole idea. Once they've truly investigated and figured out what exactly they needed to do to get in, the idea was that for everybody who asked questions, it would look like a very normal mission of Department Zero. No unnecessary questions. The important day has arrived, and Chinamar continues. I soon realized that I was in no position to evaluate the true value of the whole operation, and that I should consider myself lucky that I got the unexpected chance to access that what I thought was probably the most important discovery of modern times. The fact that I was called by this source and that the security measures were so stringent convinced me that something of great importance had been discovered. What caught his attention was the giant hangar dug into the rock to the right of the tunnel entrance. The tunnel was perfect, 10 meters high, with high plastered walls like it was just made, and naturally invoked the question, what technologies were used by these higher beings to be able to make such type of facilities that remained for thousands of years? It wasn't just in the Romanian mountains, it's in all ancient facilities all over the world. At the top, the hangar had a mechanical system, like a curtain, made of a translucent material which covered only a quarter of the height of the entrance. Two hemispherical structures were used by Americans. These buildings looked more like research stations from another planet and gave them a nice feeling of comfort and great security. The material they were made of was white and surrounded by hexagonal surfaces. Near the top, there was a white band of dark blue colored material. When Chinamar stopped next to one of the structures, just a few meters from one of the sides of the tunnel, his heart began to beat loudly. Beyond the white barrier guarded by two American soldiers, they saw probably the most spectacular mystery on this planet. What was discovered in this mountainous area? After another turn, there was a perfect straight road stretching for about 50 meters, which looked very much like a subway tunnel. At the bottom, in the very heart of the mountain, there was something that looked like a huge gate, which seemed to be sliding to the left, taking up less than a quarter of the width of the gallery. This entrance was guarded by a huge sliding door. The technology the Americans had was amazing. The plasma drilling machine, which wasn't that big, required a special equipment, especially for those who were standing around it. Everything was monitored on computers, their every move in drilling to the center of the mountain. It was said that after a few meters, Radu and the mysterious gentleman finally reached one very interesting gallery, as they describe it. The energy barrier was actually an energy projection, but they never succeeded in figuring out who put it there or how it remained in working order after thousands of years. When they got to the gallery, they couldn't get through. When they examined the place, they noticed one big, perfectly cut square section, which appeared to be inlaid in the wall of the mountain. On the square was drawn an equilateral triangle pointing upwards. This was the key that was left by those who built the structure. The problem with the energy barrier was, wait for it, the frequency of the vibrations. I felt that between me and the energy barrier there was some kind of compatibility, a kind of mutual magnetism, and I felt I had passed successfully the personal vibration test. I kept asking myself, what level of technological and spiritual development had the creators of this real threshold for an energy check that modern science cannot understand, let alone reproduce in any way, shape, or form? But Radu passed through the barrier freely, and the only thing he felt was a pleasurable tickle in his body. Everyone else who tried to pass got a severe headache, dizziness, and nausea. Chinomar pressed the switch, removing the barrier temporarily. The stone door at the entrance began to slide open quietly, almost without any noise. That's when they saw the great gallery, which was illuminated without any light source present. It ended in a giant hole inside the mountain. The end of the great gallery led to another hole, but unlike in the new room, which they called the Hall of Projections, was circular. Radu said that when they entered into the Hall of Projections, they had the feeling that they were already in another world. The floor was the same as in the other gallery, but it featured turquoise, and everything around them they could see certainly didn't look like anything they had ever seen on Earth. Right from the beginning, their attention was nailed at the back of the room. Halfway through its diameter, the hole was connected to the stone wall of the mountain. Half of the wall of the Hall of Projections was actually the stone wall of the mountain. The stone walls were approximately 10-20 meters high, and inside them they found 3 huge tunnel entrances, one in front and 2 other symmetrically placed on each side of it. It's interesting that in the hall itself they saw stone tables in the shape of the letter T, which were placed along the walls. T is coming from the Greek theos, which in Greek means God. There were also interesting writings that were very complex and they couldn't read them, but they managed to find similarities in the form of triangles and circles in the writings. There were 5 tables on each side, and on some of the tables there were objects that were indefinable. They looked like some scientific instruments but were unknown until their discovery. The story of Radu goes as follows. I tried to move one of them, but it was very well anchored in the ground. The fine wires were extremely flexible and light, and inside them small pulses of light could be seen that were gliding along their entire length. 2 of the tables were empty, covered only by a fine layer of orange-colored dust. The real surprise came with the distinctive element that was the reason for the scientists to call the room the Hall of Projections. When a man stood before a table, a hologram image appeared which represented aspects of a scientific field. The images were 3-dimensional in color, approximately 2.5 meters tall. The projections appeared on their own as if by themselves, but at the same time, they were dependent on the person who was projecting them. I touched lightly one of the squares, which was the largest, and the hologram began to present anatomical structure of the human body. Actually, I quickly realized that it was my own body from the specific mark I had on my arm. Even though I wasn't moving, I saw a holographic image of different parts of my body that kept changing, presenting me from different angles. If I lifted my finger from the square, the images with plants and animals came back. If I moved my finger towards the middle of the square, the image showed the inside of my body, showing me the projection of my internal organs according to the position of my finger on the square. I realized that when I was moving my finger in a certain way, I was getting a magnified image of the area that I was observing. It was all like a dream, but how all of this advanced technology was right there, hidden for millennia, and who had built this? It was beyond the wildest dreams of all scientists. When someone was touching other squares, they glowed in orange, and again, the unfamiliar writing appeared. There was a detailed analysis of the genetics of the 2 individuals and options to create a new hybrid form between those who pressed the squares, which is outrageous. It was a detailed description how to make it happen, how to do it if you want to create it, and what to do things in the right way. The theory that the beginning of the human civilization many years ago was perhaps set in a hybrid way may be true. It's like those who created this wanted to leave all this priceless treasure, but they didn't want us to know who they were. In the hall of projections, there were also projections from the field of physics, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, geometry, and the field that represented the characteristics of several intelligent races that didn't look much like humans. The information was so extensive that the several teams of scientists could have spent several years there without worrying that it would be depleted. All of this gave the impression of a vast universal library, which was synthesized in an ingenious way by a mysterious, extremely advanced civilization in a spiritual and in a technological way. Notice what they had run into. They stumbled upon a device which was cylindrical in shape. They found it around one corner. There were wires, kind of wires, around it. We cannot tell if it's the cables we are familiar with, something that looked like cables, with sensors on the edges, and they thought it was an ancient thinking machine. What would you encounter nowadays as a thinking machine is, if you search deep, you will find one of the methods that the governments and the secret societies are using to monitor and control people that they need is called remote viewing. Remote viewing is the ability to see what is happening in real time in whichever point on planet Earth you want. Being able to observe from a distance wirelessly through the free energy, the potential and the quantum field which we have all within and around us. Remote viewing is just a modern way to express what we can do by default. Chinamar suggested that this machine was designed by its creators to be approximately 3.5 meters, so probably the creature that was connected to the sensors inside has been able to control a very large psychic energy and channel it accordingly. At a distance of approximately 10 meters behind the command panel, there was a dome, and in front of it, a vessel shaped like an antique amphora. The remarkable thing here is that the contents of the amphora were one of the main things of the discovery. There weren't any patterns or writings on it. In a weird way, the inner walls of the amphora emitted a slight blue light that gave even more magical reflections to the white dust. It was made of reddish metal and didn't have handles. The sleek cover made it impossible to see what was inside, but under a special light, a very fine shimmering white powder was visible. After analyzing this powder, they discovered that it represented the unknown crystalline structure of a monatomic gold. It's a derivative of gold and it has a brilliant white color. Its atoms are arranged in a two-dimensional grid, unlike the ordinary gold, which has a yellow color, and its atoms are arranged in 3 dimensions. It's very hard to get this type of gold powder, especially in this very high purity, as described in some ancient texts and the few authentic alchemical directions from the Middle East. Actually, to this day, the modern science cannot obtain this extraordinary purity of monatomic gold, but even as such, it has incredible therapeutic effects on living tissues. The secret of this powder is that it mostly stimulates certain energy flows and changes the cell structure and more specifically the neurons. In other words, it causes a very rapid rejuvenation process, and this has been used by some mystical individuals in the past to be able to live more than 200 years, if they of course consume this type of substance from time to time. In a specific time, with specific instructions, life can last many years and retain its physical body in the same shape. This of course is unknown to mankind, but there are quite few strange stories about immortality. Is this how the mysterious Count Saint-Germain did it, who traveled through the centuries, and every time people saw him and communicated with him, he looked exactly the same? Ancient alchemist, reality traveler. When scientists examined the powder, they realized that, pay attention here, it was mixed with another element unknown to Earth to this day. When Chinemar stepped on the surface of the square in front of a small dome in the center, he was left speechless. A huge hologram appeared with moving elements projected from the slit of the dome. He quickly understood that in front of him is humanity's distant past since its creation. Although it was just a brief presentation of our past, it contained information about the hidden origins of humanity, and on the subject he says the following. I became convinced of the falsity of Darwin's theory of evolution as far as the human species is concerned. His basic mistake was not so much in the concept, which is common knowledge, but in the ignorance of specific elements that happened on Earth in the remote past. The aspects that I saw were synthesized and realized in an extremely intelligent and at the same time in a deeply intuitive way. I felt my legs go soft with emotion and I got down on my knees, continuing to observe the real images of the most important aspects of human history, including its true origins, which create so much controversy these days. Unfortunately, he was not allowed to share more on this subject. The only thing he said is this: it's amazing how what is believed to have actually happened is largely a lie, while myths and legends, which fill books with tales and which are considered by most people to be the product of a vivid imagination, are almost entirely real. Over time, this weird distortion has caused many problems and conflicts between people. The information that he got led him to the conclusion that the whole complex, located in the mountains, was at least 55,000 years old. The lessons were seemingly very easy to understand and simple, but at the same time filled with so much details that anyone would be confused when setting out to explore them. I saw the truth about the Egyptian civilization and the way the structures were built on the territory of Egypt, and the truth that is completely different from the nonsense maintained today by Egyptologists. I saw what really happened during the Great Flood. Where are the roots of the next human race? At first, he thought that the holographic projection would show him the origin of mankind to the moment when the mountain was created. Then, he was surprised because the holographic projections began to present the development and life of different races and civilizations to the 5th century AD. However, no one can say what was the reason for the historical information to end right at that point. He saw the amazing presentations of images from the life of Jesus. He said that the events that took place were much more astonishing than those presented in the Gospel. The projections also revealed many of the people who were on the hill during Jesus' crucifixion, people who were not of his time but had come there from other historical periods. Operation Trojan Horse, for example. Those human beings had the same clothing as the Jews present at the moment of the crucifixion, yet had completely different features, and for that reason they were hiding their faces under the hem of their clothes. The hologram also presented part of lives and the spiritual missions of other extraordinary personalities. He went on saying that he had also seen the actions of great spiritual reformers from approximately 20,000 years ago that are absolutely unknown today. The projection continued only for an hour and a half, and he managed to be extremely focused during that period to remember everything what was given to him as information so he could share it with all the secret agents around him and possibly to give us some of that information as well. After the disappearance of the hologram, I stayed still for a while, staring into nothingness. After Radu shared the story about his expedition to the underground secrets of the Romanian Sphinx, he returned to his normal life and was no more working with secret agents. His story had already been published and he was trying to keep his identity a secret. His publisher forwarded him only the most significant reviews. The interesting thing is that during that time, he was contacted by intermediary on behalf of some Tibetan Lama, a fact which at that stage seemed very strange. The Lama later turned out to be a quite mysterious person himself. He insisted to meet Radu personally at his villa in Bucharest to introduce him to the mystic Lama who would take him to one of the caves in Tibet to introduce him to the goddess Machandi. In his upcoming trip, he discovers new secrets and he is in shock because this time he found himself in the middle of an event that is occurring in a different time and space and experiences a sensation of traveling through time. Watch the episode until the end to find out exactly what he meant by traveling through time. We're going to challenge you once again. So Radu and the mysterious gentleman agreed to meet in 2 days. When the time of the meeting came, Radu miraculously found the address immediately among the many houses and was kindly welcomed. The man insisted to keep his identity a secret, so Radu called him by the ally Eleanor. Chinamar started questioning Eleanor, why it's so important for everything to happen this way, and Eleanor answered him that soon all the answers will come to him and he will establish a connection with his physical self. At this point, Radu wondered what's so strange and different in this completely ordinary looking man in his mid-30s. The problem is that actually I'm 62 years old. Radu was stunned. He decided to give him a chance to explain how was that possible. Eleanor expected this reaction, so he gave him his ID, in which it was written that he was born in 1942. But how was that possible? The picture in the document he showed was undoubtedly him, but the shocking thing was that he hadn't changed at all from the moment the picture was taken, and he literally looked exactly the same way. Of course, Radu Chinamar thought all of this was one big lie, a big fraud, but wondered who would bother fake his documents just to lie about their age. I was born in Oradea under the most normal conditions. I lived there until I was 28 years old when I moved to Bucharest. Then, a very decisive event happened in my life. One day, I received a registered letter, but the sender's name was unknown to me. The sender's address was a post office box at one of the post offices here in Bucharest. Intrigued, I opened the envelope and found several beautifully written pages with a relatively clumsy language phrasing. Then, I learned with a great astonishment that the person who wrote the letter was my own ancestor, of whom neither I nor my parents knew anything. Yet somehow, in a strange way, the author of the letter seemed to know me very well, mentioning some of the important events in my life and also expressing some proper observations about every member of my family. I was asked not to disclose the contents of this letter to anyone because it exposes information that is precious to me. If those parts of the letter amazed me, the following ones puzzled me. Apparently, my predecessor was from my father's ancestry, but the real problem was that he claimed that he was born in 1424 in Germany, in an area that in the present day would be around the city of Cologne. Here comes the question, is there an extraterrestrial intervention and the priests, the gods who came down from heaven? What were they actually like? What did they leave behind? And what did they teach our ancient civilizations? From this, I concluded that the actions of the master alchemists were some kind of spiritual inheritance, a particular tradition, a tradition that rooted in the very distant past of the humanity. Radu was left speechless from what he heard from Eleanor, but the questions kept coming into his mind. He only asked his ancestor why he had chosen to trust him by giving him this very special object. Fate made it so that I happened to be the last male descendant of the main branch of my family tree that interested my ancestor. And yes, if you're wondering, the object is with me, and no, unfortunately, I didn't get it directly from him due to security measures which I'm not going to elaborate. Radu was so excited that he asked to see the object, and when Eleanor showed it to him, he shared the following with us. It was made out of metal cube, and the approximate length of its side was 15 centimeters and looked like a net with a big loop with a rhomboid shape. Inside that cube was a sphere which was made of the same metal. Exactly how this object was created, surely only the initiated in alchemy know. For starters, the Lama revealed many secrets to Chinamar. One of them about the creature named Idam. In Tibet, there was a certain level of spiritual practice where the disciple, under the careful guidance of his teacher, begins to apply the technique to create Idam, a creature which is a type of a guardian. The procedure was very complicated and difficult to execute, and an extreme precision was required for the construction of a colored sand mandala, and the student had to make a constant efforts to successfully master certain mental techniques for concentration and visualization. Those who succeeded in creating Idam decided to leave it to accompany them throughout their physical life while they were evolving along their spiritual path. Others took what they needed at the time or for the next few years and then released it, and thus they continued on even further. Essentially, the nature of Idam is purely mental. In brief, the Idam is the quintessence of the mental energy of the person who created it and summoned it, the energy that comes from peculiarities of his personality and subconscious. Now you will enter this mountain and find the answers to all of your questions concerning the purpose of this journey. This moment is important as it will create a series of positive events that will be triggered in a snowball effect, and you will take an active part in the process. According to the notes we have, Radu entered the cave and saw a goddess who described as entering slowly and divine. Coming from the end of the mountain hallway was unexpected, it was mystical, and for everyone who don't believe that point of view, Radu shares the following. I am aware that I will never be able to fully describe in words what I felt in those extraordinary moments. We are accustomed to a life in a much more limited reality that cannot offer us the much richer and multicolored range of experiences and sensations of words higher than the physical. The mind of the ordinary man is so attached to the dimension that they inhabits and to his pursuits that they encounter a reality exceeding their capacity for understanding, tend to block and even deny what they perceive. By different situation, Radu means that for the first time in his life, he was seeing a being from another world. The strange thing is that what he describes doesn't resemble any of the known human races, and in the first moments he could not control his thoughts, emotions, and actions, and it was as if his mind had been taken over by the contact with the being in front of him. This is so-called channeling, when one who decides to accept first to surrender merges in a way with the one with whom he has made a channel, and so in this way the other has control is not the right word, but it's appropriate in this case over his actions, thoughts, and emotions. The channeling with the appropriate frequency settings and vibrations acts the same way as hypnosis, for example. They just differ in their form. Her skin was blue, tinged with dark blue. She had celestial eyes. The part of the eyes that in the humans was white had a bright yellow color, and her iris was dark green. Thanks to the goddess, Chinamar received special training for enlightenment. After his two amazing adventures, quite expectedly, Radu changes his lifestyle and his view of the world completely. Already an enlightened person, he devotes himself to a deeper studying of the realm of esotericism and the spiritual. Thanks to Eleanor, he also became passionate about alchemy. I began to realize that nothing in life is random, and our encounters and relationships with certain people that leave behind deep mental and emotional scars are actually the result of mysterious events that only seem chaotic, but in reality have their specific purpose. One quiet evening while Rado was sitting at home and thinking on what he had learned and what had happened to him so far, one of his secret visitors visited him at home and was very surprised. The reason was that it was required from Rado to make contact with the enlightened Lama he was with in Tibet. In return, upon successful contact, he would receive a very high position in Department 0 as an expert consultant, which would have opened new opportunities to uncover even more mysteries and riddles. Having received this, Radu set out on another expedition, more specifically to the tunnel leading to Egypt. In the aftermath, one of the extraordinary situations in which he fell into the Hall of Projections, 3 tunnels are found, and one of them shocked everyone because it led to Egypt. The tunnel was thousands of miles long, even though they used unknown ordinary people at that time, top secret cars as they described them, and devices to reach their final destination that were forced several times to stop for a bit at some of the stations that Rado wasn't allowed to give more details about. After a long journey, the moment had finally arrived that the device we may call similar to our cars signaled that they were approaching their final destination. It's important to clarify that Radu Chinamar is sharing a lot of secrets with us, but he also hides a lot of things, and we think you can see why. What Radu witnessed had nothing to do with the old Egyptian civilization or the pyramids or the Sphinx. The space at the end of the tunnel was perhaps the greatest mystery. The reason for its creation was unknown. It was extremely ancient. In comparison, it was more than 30,000 years older than the Egyptian civilization, but was constructed later than the Hall of Projections. It was pretty deep underground on another continent somewhere near Cairo, in a tunnel mysteriously created by some space-time invention. What I found most disturbing was the fact that I was next to something hidden from almost the entire world, whose significance no one knew. The first was that the whole inside was illuminated without having its own light source, as if by itself. Considering that the place was more than 40,000 years old, and underground, that it had no ventilation, no windows, no touch of air, inside it should be extremely dark, and yet it's extremely bright with a warm yellow light. It turned out that the thin layer covering the walls was very special and had an organic character. It was a life form unknown at that time, based on Deuterium, a silvery transition metal, a rare earth element. The technology used to embed it has been preserved for thousands of years. One of the interesting finds of Chinamar in the occult hole was a platform made of yellow metal, probably gold, that was floating in the air. Its surface area was approximately 2 meters. The platform looked a lot like a surfboard, and it was no more than 3 centimeters thick. The only accessory on the platform was a dark blue crystal in the form, of course, of a pyramid. The device was only working if a person managed to connect to the vibration and frequency that came out of the crystal. Otherwise, it looked like it was broken. If you accidentally lost focus while you're in contact with it, the platform would fall down and go back to the starting position, levitating very, very gently, and as if had been restarted and you had to start all over again. It looked like the crystal itself was set from an energy standpoint to handle and facilitate contact with human consciousness. when interacting with human consciousness, so that we can't help but ask the question, who and how has constructed this whole invention? The tremendous discovery of which he had witnessed in the occult hole was that so-called time machine. This, they say, was a device that could project a man into the future, the past, or the present. It's about time travel of the consciousness. The consciousness was experiencing all that was happening and the body wasn't moving. When the scientists tried to investigate where this machine came from, who created it, the machine just refused to give an answer. I had the distinct feeling that the light around me became more subdued and the shapes of the objects were somehow blurring. I suddenly started sweating and shaking. We'd like to add something here about the time machine. Many people believe that it's impossible to build a time machine, because in principle, time is an illusion, and the time, it's a three-dimensional projection of what all of us on planet Earth have accepted as a condition for existence. But in principle, there are many things that are beyond its reach. Time is an illusion. We know very well that the past and the future are illusions and that everything exists in the moment, here and now. It's important to add, and may everyone accept and understand it as they fit, that the time machine does not return you back into the past, but takes you back to a different past, into a different reality that is very close to that past, but not 100% the same. It's impossible for a person to go back to the same past since it's already past. If they go back successfully, there are such experiments, physical and mental, they find themselves in a very similar, very close parallel reality, close to that moment of happening, and they pick up specific information from there in order to bring it back to the moment of here and now. But because everything is now, basically, that's why they can enter a different parallel reality forward or backward, precisely because they already exist in the moment of here and now. It was something like a clear darkness. Then I felt myself falling through some kind of a tunnel, but upwards. Then I heard a familiar woman's voice. After a while, I saw myself in the cave in Tibet with the goddess Machandi. Then I felt the same emotions as in that previous moment. Then somehow the picture became unstable and then it completely disappeared. Minutes after that, he closed his eyes again and 3 creatures appeared in front of him that looked very much like people, but they certainly weren't humans because they had very different features. When he tried to focus and examine them in a little more detail, he described them like this. I was surprised by the look of them, mostly from the deeply negative empathic feeling that I felt around them that repulsed me to such an extent that I was brought back to reality. Before leaving the site, something even more confusing happened. The team of scientists using a superpowered computer detected an unfinished tunnel starting at the Pyramid of Cheops that was going in the direction of the occult tunnel, but after 2/3 of the way, suddenly changing direction downwards deep in the ground. Apparently, those who started building the tunnel from the Pyramid of Cheops knew about the one in the occult chamber. But the question here is why they wanted to reach the hole and how did they find out its existence. He says that those who built the pyramid also had access to the occult hole and were very aware of its secrets or of the mechanisms and possibilities that were used in it. Then, Rado received classified information from a US agent who gave him information about the tunnel under the Pyramid of Cheops. I'm sorry, I can't share more details. What I can tell you for sure is that those who constructed the tunnel underneath the Pyramid of Cheops were from a very different civilization than those who created the occult hole. We have solid evidence to support this. Those who dug the tunnel under the pyramid were of the reptilian species. we found the skeleton of one of them in a tunnel. The tunnel was sealed and its entrance was hidden in a very elaborate way in the structure of the pyramid. Of course, most likely when he says reptilian, he means the ancient race of reptiles. They've been talked about for a long time, their various conspiracies and points of view, and the common one is that they've imprisoned us in a three-dimensional matrix which encompasses the planet Earth, but over time they have imprisoned themselves because they have adapted too much to the life on planet Earth and currently want to find a way out and escape by screwing up the human civilization. Of course, it's argued that they don't live in the visible world and on the surface, but in the subterranean recesses of planet Earth, and maybe this tunnel under the pyramid is linked to the story of the legendary labyrinth beneath the Sphinx and the library of knowledge told to us by Thoth the Atlantean. Is that so? We cannot know for certain, but there are always traces left in time for the wise to follow, as long as there is enough desire.
Survivors of ancient civilizations, Lemurians, Atlanteans, vanished from the surface but continued to exist deep beneath our feet in a hidden world known as Agartha. Agartha is believed to be a large hidden kingdom inside the Earth, not in the hot, liquid core that science talks about. In most versions of the story, Agartha is a very advanced and peaceful civilization. It is completely separate from the people who live on the surface. It has crystal cities, glowing energy, and people who live in peace with nature and spiritual forces. For those who believe in it, even as a symbol or idea, Agartha is more than just a hidden world underground. It's a place untouched by war, greed, or ego. In this society, knowledge guides life. The idea of Agartha in the West started with a French writer named Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvedre. He lived in the late 1800s and was very interested in secret knowledge, politics, and spiritual ideas. Also, he thought there was a deeper meaning behind how the world works. And in 1886, he wrote a book called Mission of India in Europe. In that book, he introduced the idea of Agartha to the Western world. Saint-Yves said Agartha was a real place deep underground. A long time ago, wise and ancient people went there to hide. This happened during a dark period in history, which in Hindu tradition is called the Kali Yuga. According to him, Agartha wasn't destroyed. It just stayed hidden, waiting for the right time to come back. He said Agartha was a huge city with millions of people. It was ruled by a leader who had both spiritual wisdom and total power. The whole society followed a system called synarchy. That means everything, religion, science, and politics, worked together in harmony. For Saint-Yves, this was better than the chaos he saw in modern governments. What made Saint-Yves' claim even more unusual was how he said he learned about Agartha. He claimed that he studied with a mysterious man named Haji Sharif. Saint-Yves described him as a high-ranking spiritual teacher from the East. He also said that through Haji Sharif and through what he called journeys via astral projection, he was able to directly access the hidden kingdom. He wrote about it with confidence and detail, as if he had truly been there. And maybe he was. At first, this book was not meant to be shared with the public. Saint-Yves supposedly destroyed all copies except for a few. Some believe he did this because he feared he had revealed too much, but one of those copies survived. In 1910, after his death, the book was published by Gérard Encausse, who was better known in occult circles as Papoose. From that point on, the myth of Agartha began to grow. However, Saint-Yves was not the first person to write about a hidden world beneath the earth. Before him, The French colonial official Louis Jacoliot had written about a mysterious kingdom called Asgartha. He said he found it in ancient Indian manuscripts. But that's not all. The story of Agartha doesn't begin and end with a single book, or even a single culture. It's part of a pattern that seems to echo across centuries and continents. Long before Agartha had a name in the West, ancient civilizations were already speaking about hidden realms beneath the earth. They were describing them in ways strikingly similar to one another, even though these cultures supposedly had no contact. Let's start in the East. In Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, there is a sacred mountain called Mount Meru. It is also known as Sumeru or Mahameru. This mountain is said to stand at the center of all things. Ancient texts describe it as a giant pillar of reality. If you approach from the east, you'll see peaks of crystal. From the south, the peaks appear as lapis lazuli. From the west, they shine like rubies. And from the north, they gleam with gold. It's so large that the sun and moon are said to move around it. But what lies below Meru is just as fascinating. Old Indian texts speak of a place called Patala. Patala is a world below the earth made up of several realms. These are not places of punishment like the Western idea of hell. Patala is described as beautiful and full of life. Ancient Indians wrote about its forests, palaces, and glowing jewels. The beings who live there include serpent-like Nagas, as well as Danavas and Rakshasas. They are said to be highly advanced in both technology and spiritual power. Some stories say these beings are wise and full of knowledge. Others say they can be hostile to humans. Later Buddhist teachings also talk about these underground worlds. The Nagas become linked to hidden water palaces and secret caves beneath Asia, especially in Tibet and the Himalayas. Monks from the region tell stories about tunnels, shrines, and underground cities under their monasteries. They say only those with special training can reach them. In Tibet, there is a story about Shambhala, another hidden kingdom. People often mix it up with Agartha or say they are connected. According to the Kalachakra Tantra, Shambhala is a place of peace, wisdom, and enlightenment. It cannot be reached in normal ways, and only those who are spiritually ready can find the path. But things get even more interesting. In some esoteric traditions, Shambhala and Agartha are seen as twin realms. One is linked to divine order, the other is linked to raw power. Some call them the right hand and the left hand. Others say that Shambhala exists on a higher, spiritual level, while Agartha is more physical. In both cases, they are said to be hidden inside or beneath the earth, and both are described as protectors of ancient knowledge. Now let's cross oceans and deserts and head into the highlands of North America. Among the Hopi people of Arizona, there are old legends about a time when the surface of the earth was destroyed twice, first by fire and then by ice. During these disasters, the Hopi say they were helped by celestial beings. These beings led them to the ant people, who took them into large underground chambers where they could survive. These ant people, called the Anu Sinom, taught the Hopi how to store food, how to grow crops in the dark, and how to live in harmony with nature. The Hopi also say that ants have narrow waist today because they shared so much of their own food with the Hopi during those hard times. Then there's also a curious detail in their language. The Hopi word for ant is Anu, and their word for friends is Naki. Put together, they form the word Anunnaki. This is a striking parallel to the ancient Sumerian beings who, in some versions, came from the sky or from deep within the earth to guide early humans. And this idea that advanced, non-human or semi-human beings live beneath the earth and occasionally interact with us repeats again and again. These myths aren't exactly the same, but they have clear similarities. They all talk about a world beneath the surface and beings with advanced knowledge. But how is it possible that so many different civilizations, living in different times and places, told such similar stories? Maybe they were in contact with ancient cultures that didn't disappear but went underground. And if that's true, then there must be space beneath our feet for an advanced civilization. And that brings us to the Hollow Earth theory. Some of the first ideas that the Earth might not be solid go back to the 1600s. At that time, scientists and philosophers were trying to explain strange things, like the Earth's magnetic field. One of the first to suggest a hollow Earth was Edmond Halley. He was the English astronomer known for Halley's Comet. In 1692, Halley said the Earth might be made of several layers like spheres inside each other. He believed these layers spun at different speeds, and he meant it seriously. He even thought there could be air between them, maybe even life. He also said light might come from deep inside the Earth. In the early 1800s, an American named John Cleves Symmes Jr. went even further. He believed the Earth was hollow and had huge openings at the North and South poles. He said these were doors to the inner world. He believed people could actually travel inside the Earth. Because of that, he spent years trying to raise money for an expedition. But unfortunately for him, he found nothing. Later, in the early 20th century, Marshall Gardner built on this theory and introduced an even more elaborate vision. He claimed that the planet was entirely hollow and contained a central sun, a smaller glowing sphere suspended in the middle of the Earth. According to Gardner, this inner sun provided warmth and light for a lush inner ecosystem. He said there was a whole ecosystem down there, with plants, animals, and maybe even people, and in that world everything was different. Gravity inside the Earth doesn't work the same as it does on the surface. Some theories say that as you move into the inner shell, gravity changes direction. Instead of pulling you straight down, it starts pulling you toward the inside wall of the Earth. So there's no longer one clear down. Directions start to lose meaning. Movement feels lighter and easier. Some people also believe that time flows differently in this inner world. According to those who go inside, 1 minute there can feel like an hour on the surface. Clocks stop working normally. Time seems to stretch or shrink depending on where you are. The closer you get to the inner sun, the more it feels like time is bending. In this version of the hollow Earth, the planet is shaped like a toroid, something like a donut or a spinning ring. In this shape, energy moves in a constant loop. It flows in through one pole and out through the other. Some say this energy is what keeps the inner sun floating in the center. It also helps support life inside the Earth. This energy might also explain strange things that explorers have noticed near the poles, like compasses that spin or freeze, or places where GPS and navigation tools stop working. But where is the entrance? If there really is a vast inner world beneath our feet, how can we reach it? According to legend, there isn't just one doorway to Agartha, but several. One of the most frequently cited locations is deep in the Himalayas. Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash isn't as tall as Mount Everest, but no one has ever reached its summit. Not because it's too hard to climb, but because something always seems to stop people from going all the way. According to local belief, only one person, the Buddhist monk Milarepa, ever reached the top. And even he was said to have done it not by climbing, but through spiritual means. Some theorists claim Kailash is not a mountain at all, but an ancient pyramid. In esoteric tradition, it's thought to be one of the main portals into Agartha. Saint Yves d'Alvedre, the man who first introduced Agartha to the Western world, said that its entrance was hidden beneath the Himalayas. And surprisingly, he said Tibetan monks were the ones who guarded it. Later, other explorers like Ferdinand Ossendowski heard similar stories. Monks in Tibet told them about tunnels under the mountains. These tunnels, they said, lead to a huge underground world ruled by a mysterious king of the world. On the other side of the globe, Mount Shasta in Northern California is tied to another powerful legend. Here, the story shifts from Tibetan monks to the mythical Lemurians. They were survivors of an ancient lost continent. According to the legend, they built an underground city called Telos beneath Mount Shasta. But over time, Mount Shasta has been a magnet for spiritual seekers and adventurers alike. People talk about strange lights, mysterious disappearances, and sightings of tall, robed beings in the forest. In 1987, it became a gathering point for the harmonic convergence, linking it to global spiritual energy and interdimensional portals. Whether these beings are remnants of Lemuria or connected to Agartha, many believe the tunnel systems below Mount Shasta lead straight to the inner earth. Then there's Egypt. Beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza, near the ancient Sphinx, lies an entrance said to lead directly into Agartha. Recent discoveries have revealed previously unknown chambers and subterranean tunnels beneath the plateau. These findings challenge everything we've been told that the pyramids were mere tombs. They are perfectly lined up with stars in Orion's belt. Their shapes and sizes follow exact math. The way they were built is too advanced for the time. That's why many people think they weren't built by regular humans. This is where the Hall of Records comes in. It's a hidden room that many believe is under the Sphinx. They say it holds lost knowledge from before the Great Flood. The Sphinx then might not be just a statue. Maybe the Sphinx isn't guarding treasure, but the truth about the Hollow Earth. The next possible entrance is Mount Rushmore. Most people see it as a national monument. It shows the faces of 4 American presidents. But behind those faces, a doorway was recently discovered. For a long time, no one knew it was there. And if there's a door, it must lead somewhere, right? Many say it leads to a hidden room called the Hall of Records. This room was supposed to store important documents, but it was never finished. Today it is sealed and no one is allowed to enter. If it's sealed and people aren't allowed in, that usually means something is being hidden. Now add to that the location. Mount Rushmore stands in the Black Hills of South Dakota. For centuries, native tribes have said this land is sacred. They believe it holds powerful energy, so it's no surprise that many people think this door doesn't lead to a room with old papers. They believe it leads straight into Agartha. But the place most people believe is connected to Agartha is even farther south. We're talking about Antarctica. Many say that deep beneath that ice lies one of the most closely guarded entrances to the inner Earth. In the late 1930s, Nazi Germany launched an expedition to this frozen continent. Officially, it was a scientific mission, but it didn't take long for rumors to grow around it. According to these stories, the Nazis didn't just study the terrain, they built an underground base. They called it Base 211, or New Schwabenland. But many believe it wasn't a shelter at all. They think the Nazis found pathways that lead directly into the inner Earth. The base may have been just a cover and an excuse to stay and explore without being questioned. Or maybe it was built not to hide from the world above, but to connect with the world below. Just after World War II, in 1946, the United States launched Operation High Jump, led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. It was one of the largest military expeditions to Antarctica ever assembled, involving ships, planes, thousands of troops, and a significant amount of secrecy. The reason for the expedition was to test equipment in extreme cold, or at least That is what they told us. But the mission was cut short and much shorter than planned, and what happened next only added to the mystery. According to a secret diary later attributed to Admiral Byrd, he saw something no one expected. In his diary, Byrd describes flying beyond the South Pole into a warm land, lush and green, with strange animals and an advanced civilization. He writes of encountering beings who warned him about the state of the surface world, expressing concern over our path of destruction. Byrd called this place the land beyond the poles. Now, if this diary is real, then Admiral Byrd didn't just stumble upon a new continent. He may have crossed the threshold into Agartha itself. And on top of that, Antarctica continues to be surrounded by restricted zones, unexplained magnetic anomalies, and international treaties that strictly limit civilian access. Could these measures be about environmental protection? Maybe, but many believe they serve another purpose: to keep what's underneath hidden. The Amazon rainforest is another entrance to Agartha. Indigenous tribes speak of portals hidden deep in the jungle, guarded by nature and time. There are stories of glowing caverns, lost cities swallowed by vines, and guardians who appear only when the uninvited get too close. In many parts of the Amazon, people disappear without explanation. Those who return speak of strange lights and voices in the dark. In these places, compasses fail, and the jungle itself seems to breathe. Hidden within that living green maze are said to be the ancient doors, remnants of a civilization that went below long ago and never returned. It's no coincidence that some of the earliest references to Agartha-like worlds come from South America. Even without written language, oral traditions preserved across centuries continue to describe a great kingdom below, accessed only by those who are called. Beyond the entrances we've already explored, there are many others, from Mount Epomeo in Italy to the lost trails of King Solomon's mines. But knowing where the doors are isn't enough to open them and to enter Agartha. You can't enter by walking or digging, because Agartha isn't just protected by distance or terrain, but by frequency as well. Some modern theories say that Agartha exists on a different frequency than our world. Think of it like a hidden radio station. It's always on, but you can only hear it if you're tuned in just right. That means these entrances don't open just because of where you are. They open based on your energy. Only when a person is in the right state, spiritually, emotionally, and even physically, can the gate appear. This idea shows up in many stories as well. Explorers lost in caves who suddenly find glowing rooms. Monks who say the tunnels open only to those who are pure. It's said that if someone isn't ready, they won't even see the entrance, even if it's right in front of them. But even that isn't enough, because these entrances are not unguarded. In Antarctica, they're guarded by beings known as the Wall Guardians. In Tibet, the entrances are protected by monks trained to guard ancient secrets. In Egypt, the guardian is the Sphinx. In South America, shamans warn of sacred paths that lead not to gold, but to silence. And then there are the quiet watchers, those in secret societies, hidden orders, or even positions of power, who know more than they say. Some claim that entire governments have knowledge of Agartha's location and are actively keeping it from public view. But why hide it? Well, the answer might be simpler than you think. According to those who guard the story, we are not ready for what is down there. It's not that we don't have the technology to get there. The problem is inside us. We don't have the calm, the focus, or the humility. And Agartha is not a place for people who want power just to control others. It's a place built on balance and peace, and balance can't exist if someone brings greed, pride, or destruction with them. History shows us what we usually do when we find something powerful. We try to take it and we use it for our own gain. Now imagine what would happen if a peaceful place opened its doors to our world full of chaos. That's why Agartha is hidden. Not forever, but until we change.